My name is Anne Russell. I'm gradually reading through my book, Alcohol and Pregnancy, A Mother's Responsible Disturbance. The second edition is actually called Alcohol and Pregnancy, My Responsible Disturbance. I've read a couple of chapters, I guess, and now I'm going to read the introduction. A long time ago, about 2003, 2004, I wrote a series of poems as well, and I've actually put them in the book. So some of the chapters will have poetry, or small amounts of poetry in them. So I'm going to read the introduction, and the poem is called Reflections. There's something inside her at last. For the longest time there was nothing. She gazes into the mirror, raises her glass, and slowly turns away. The time for introspection is over. Until her empty glass is filled, an unpleasant unease fills her with fear, the fear of nothing and everything. She takes a drink and smiles. The love for her baby is overwhelming, overpowering, and it overshadows everything. She loves him more than anything else in her life before, more than she ever loved herself. She imagines how he will look when he's born, how she will dress him, what sort of man he will become, and whether she will live long enough to see her grandchildren. He nudges her softly. She feels so different now, so special, and for someone who's never felt special before, it's a good feeling. She watches as her image raises the glass, and as she sips the only thing that has ever made her happy, her baby waits to be born. I'm a recovering alcoholic. There's always been consequences when an addiction gets out of hand. For some, it can be the loss of a marriage, a job, a house, or reduced access to children. Women have an added burden, one with long-lasting, far-reaching, and multi-generational consequences. That of giving birth to children harmed by one of the most easily accessible and destructive teratogens in the world. When I first recognised that the behaviour of my son Seth was the result of my compulsion to drink, I knew my heart and my life would never be the same. I couldn't comprehend how I was going to keep going, knowing what I'd done to him. When I finally learned that my oldest son Mick was also affected, I wondered how I could possibly move beyond that terrible anxiety I experienced each time I stopped to think about the future. Just when I thought it could not get worse, research was released that showed epigenetic changes through prenatal exposure to alcohol can affect the family line for up to five generations. The research didn't stop, and each new article hit a different nerve until my entire body was tingling with fear all the time. The next piece from Canada indicated that the average lifespan of a person on the spectrum is 34 years. When I attempted to comprehend the legacy I would leave not only to my children, but my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the children I already love but will never know, it was like trying to make sense of infinity. In fact, I stopped trying completely and determined to do something practical. In 2000, I began my research and slowly catalogued strategies to help with the boys' more significant health and behavioural problems. After I learned more about FASD and embarked on the alarming affair of delivering lectures and presentations to anyone who would listen, I acquired a better understanding of my actions and a tenuous acceptance. The grief and guilt that comes in waves still takes its toll, but the waves are fewer and less intense until Seth becomes unwell. I was raised to take responsibility, not only for my actions, but for the various actions of my mother and sometimes even my father. My mother taught me that my behaviour was inextricably linked to her love for me. I came to understand that she wanted me to be like her, and I was not. She made me the cause of her anger, her sadness, and every emotion in between, including happiness. I have never been able to move from that position of ultimate responsibility. So many women before this new age of technology and genetic research used alcohol while pregnant. They've seen their children's daily struggles with little to no understanding these problems were caused by alcohol. They may also have watched their grandchildren struggle and accepted it was just who they were. With the latest research, it's quite clear that the consequences of prenatal alcohol exposure will not only affect immediate family, but future generations. And that is the burden this new research places on us as a society, and birth parents in particular, because now it seems that men also have a responsibility to refrain from drug and alcohol use at conception. We can no longer say that if our affected children don't drink during pregnancy, there will be no further human cost. Although I talk specifically about FASD in this book, I also broadly include the use of any other illicit or licit drugs that are teratogenic, including tobacco and cannabis. For those people who struggle with the lifelong effects of prenatal exposure to alcohol, I feel immense compassion and respect. They live and are only sometimes able to work in a world that undervalues or misinterprets their best endeavours as social irresponsibility. They are at the mercy of the expectations of others and will only occasionally be able to meet them. According to the Russell Family Fetal Alcohol Disorders Association, with Australia's current under-recognition of FASD, it is more likely than in most other industrialised nations in the world that this primary disorder will remain undiagnosed for the whole of their lives. While there are people with FASD living happy, productive lives, many more are not. They create situations without understanding the consequences. Their days are spent trying to make sense of what is happening rather than learning from experience. They can convince anyone who listens that their goals will be realised, their determination and commitment unmistakable. But when they leave the room, their dreams are forgotten. School years consist of bullying and being bullied, not the joys of learning. They take prisoners thinking they've made friends. Their lives are lived according to their peers' desires, not their own, and they don't know the difference. Then they are punished without ever understanding why. Although they feel considerable remorse, they don't find it easy to express, so they're considered to be uncaring, heartless, and antisocial. And this is almost always beyond their control and sometimes even beyond their understanding, but we still punish them. In the words of a mother from the United States, "My children know that they are doing wrong by our expressions and our words, not because they have a sense of social conscience. This does not mean that they're without a conscience. They feel remorse very deeply, but they have difficulty relating their behaviour to the consequences. So no amount of after-the-fact remorse leads them to stop breaking the rules. Because this disorder is minimally investigated and diagnosed, there are many people who can be found locked in the cycle of out-of-home care, residential care, criminal and youth justice, welfare and employment systems, mental health services, drug and alcohol facilities, vocational programs, and disability and youth services. Interviews with service providers indicate that an extremely high percentage of people with the characteristics and symptoms of FASD are floundering in the very supports that are there to help them. The reason for this is that services use strategies developed for neurotypical people. People with FASD are not neurotypical. They're not less, they're just different, and they require different approaches. We cannot afford to ignore the economic and social impact of FASD, particularly as research from Canada and the United States shows that one person with FASD can cost approximately $5 million in their lifetime. There's the lifetime of lost productivity and welfare benefits, and the lifetime of services it takes to help them through their life. Most people affected by FASD will be welfare recipients at some stage of their lives, if not for the whole of their lives. We must all be agents for responsible disturbance and educate others about the dangers of using alcohol and illicit drugs while pregnant. This is an educational message, and like many health messages passed on to the public over the years, this one can save lives. Messages and messengers appearing early in the identification of a difficult situation are frequently said to be exaggerating or overreacting. In the case of FASD, there can never be sufficient overstatement or over anything. This is truly one of the most devastating conditions on the planet because it is largely invisible and most services that might help are not currently available. If you are pregnant and have been drinking, the sooner you stop, the healthier your baby will be. Additionally, there are other factors which can increase or decrease the severity of the condition, so don't automatically think that because you've used alcohol once or twice before learning of your pregnancy, that your child will be noticeably affected. There are articles on the internet written by women who believe that because it is their body, no one will tell them what they can and can't do. They will drink while pregnant if they choose. We must gently remind these women that this message is not for their body, it's for their baby. For the mother herself, alcohol at any stage during pregnancy will only cause the same problems, if any, as when she is not pregnant. Conversely, damage to the fetus will be extensive and lifelong. Unlike those with an obvious disability such as Down syndrome, which inspires compassion and understanding, a person with FASD is often viewed as delinquent, antisocial, selfish, or manipulative. Parents and mothers in particular are met with disbelief instead of understanding, and many have been blamed and shamed. There is little support and understanding sometimes even from close friends and family. At the time of writing, there are no specific services, few specialists for disability-specific advice, only paediatric diagnostic support, and no funding for families needing financial aid to travel to those few experts around the country who may help their child. Even in the 21st century, as a birth mother myself, I have experienced these responses, and while I've tried not to take them to heart, I have never been able to deny them. I am responsible for my son's disability, for his daily difficulties, his money problems, the challenges he experiences in his relationships, and the tortured soul he sees when he looks in the mirror. If he was asked while he is unhappy if he can remember good times, his perception would be that his whole life has been one awful struggle after another. While he has had many difficult times and much trauma, he has also experienced joy, excitement, and unconditional love. During periods of stress and despondency, we all forget about the happier times, but it's sad to hear him generalize that nothing will ever goes right for him or that he will never be happy. He is an unhappy man, and there has never been anything that has made a difference to his unfortunate certainty that his life is a complete mess and he is a loser, when in fact he is and has always been, despite his early antisocial behaviour, one of the kindest, most compassionate and considerate people I've ever known. In this book I have been as honest as my memory will allow. Some of my thoughts and recollections have taken me by surprise and caused me to reassess my integrity and character. While stressful and unpleasant, it was important for me to tell them. If I experienced these feelings, then I'm sure others have, and perhaps the benefit for them is knowing that at least there is one other person in Australia who understands them. Medical professionals are mentioned often in these pages. This book is by no means a forum for doctor bashing. In all cases, the frustration and anger is just that. Frustration because parents and carers have not been able to obtain appropriate assistance for their loved ones, and anger at life in general for dealing the hand that our precious children have been dealt. I admit I've been upset and angry at some doctors for not offering assistance or referral options when we were desperate. Now, after years of research and personal contact with medical professionals here and overseas, I better understand the complexities inherent in a system where there are few FASD educational opportunities and even fewer referral options. I still find myself silently, and not so silently, begging pregnant women not to drink as they walk past me in the shops. My earlier anger and frustration has been replaced by a physical ache when I see families facing the same lack of awareness and understanding as I did decades before. Even if people with FASD can't always be accountable, parents can. We only have to tell one person who may not have known that alcohol causes birth defects, and we have helped shift the balance. The old cliche stands true. If we can save just one child from being prenatally exposed to alcohol or other drugs, then we have left the world a better place. With this condition, any one of us can save a life as easily as we draw breath. Thank you. That's the end of the introduction. Chapter 1 next week.